C'est Larissa Crawford de Caution, Calgary Niwikan, mi famille Penetanguishin puis Jamaica Niwikon. Bonjour, je m'appelle Larissa Crawford. J'ai une ascendance métisse de Penetanguishin et une ascendance afro-caribéenne de Jamaïque. Hey, I'm Larissa Crawford. I am based on Treaty 7 territory, the traditional territory of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Tsuut'ina and the Stoney Nakoda nations, as well as Métis Nation Homeland Region 3. And this is really important for me to acknowledge, and I'll talk about that in a second. I carry Métis ancestry from Penetanguishene and Afro-Caribbean ancestry from Jamaica. And I pass this ancestry on to my 5-year-old daughter, Zyra. Now, my last name, Crawford, this is a slave master name. So John Innes Crawford, a Scottish industrialist, came from Scotland to Jamaica. And there I held one of the largest plantations on the island. So Crawford was a brand used to name my ancestors. And so that only happened a couple generations ago. And it affects my life today in a lot of different ways. And so I always think it's really important to acknowledge that. Now, I am an activist with many channels of work and efforts. And I've always been an activist. Ever since I was about 13, I've been really involved in school councils and policy making and all that fun, boring stuff. I was really excited about it at a very young age. I like to talk about the way what I learn at home with my Métis family, with my Blackfoot family and friends. I really like to acknowledge all the value I get from time spent, from knowledge learned from the people I belong to. And I wasn't seeing that in our education. I wasn't seeing that in our schools. And so I really love bringing that information to teachers, to administrators through the channel of student councils. Now, again, I am an activist in many different ways. I love to focus on water, the environment, climate, racism, ableism, so discrimination that we experience when we're disabled. I have a whole basket of disabilities, chronic pain disabilities, and I'm also recovering from a brain bleed that left me with brain damage. And so there are a lot of different ways that I'm an activist. And I think what's most important is to acknowledge that that's okay. It actually has to be like that. I actually need to know what's going on in our education system to be able to address issues in our health system. I need to be aware of what's happening in our legal system in order to create better spaces of engagement in different cities that I work in. So I need to know a little bit of everything. And I've never really siloed myself into one kind of activist. And because of that, I think I've been pretty effective in my work. Now, that being said, it's also important to know what you want to do, right? What you want to focus your work on, what you're best at, what maybe you're not. And this was a journey that I've been going through for a very long time. Especially, I'd say in grade 10, when we started learning about in social studies in Alberta, we started learning about globalization. And we started learning about poverty, extreme poverty around the world. Now, I'd always been aware of it, and I'd always kind of like seen clips of it on TV or in movies or documentaries, but I never really sat and thought about that. And in social studies, I had to sit and really think about why is this happening? And why do I have, even though I grew up very poor, using the food bank, living in a trailer park, I still could look around and see, why do I have access to all this at our school, at home, and people don't around the world? And so this made me very kind of conscious and started to change the way I was thinking. Now, again, I was really involved in student councils. And one benefit of being involved in student councils is that I had very close relationships with my teachers. Now, my mom also taught at my high school, so that definitely helped. But one of the teachers that I worked really closely with on one of the councils had invited me on a humanitarian trip with her after having asked my mom to go to Ghana, actually Pandai district, very far outside of Accra, the capital city in Ghana. And my mom said yes, I said yes. And so I was given 8 months to fundraise to be able to go on this trip with my teacher. And then also, I saw this as an opportunity to bring resources that we have in abundance here to the school in Ghana. And so for the next 8 months, I went to all these different schools in the city. I asked, can I set up a donation box at this school? They all said yes. And for the next few months, I worked 4 jobs to be able to pay. And then for the trip, and then I also collected these books and school supplies. And so by the end, we had a whole classroom full of books and school supplies. And when it came down to booking the trip, my teachers collaborated and ended up fundraising a bit of money to help me go to Ghana. And so at the end, I was able to travel to the school that we were working at. And we ended up bringing over 8 suitcases full of books and school supplies. Now, in this process, we were also acknowledging, well, not all of this is going to be relevant. Not all of this is going to be needed where we're going. And so my mom was also working on and was connected with a leader who was establishing the first public library on a reserve in Western Canada. Very exciting work. And so half of our donations were able to be given to this public library. And again, half we brought to Ghana. Now I came back, I did a lot of engagement in the city around this. And the high school ended up adopting the school that we volunteered at as a sister school and began a letter exchange program. Now, I knew I really loved humanitarian work. I knew I wanted to do this for the rest of my life. And so that's what I pursued in university. And that's why I studied abroad. I worked all around the world doing humanitarian work, volunteering work. And it was after having lived in Turkey for over a year, I came back and I realized I still don't really know what channel of activism I really want to do and what I'm best at. And I also had to sit with myself too and ask myself, well, why did you think it was so much more important to be going abroad and doing all this work when you see what's happening at home in your own communities? So I had to be really critical about why was I making international volunteer work seem so much cooler than working at home? And I had to be honest with myself. I had to be honest and recognize I wasn't the best person to do a lot of the volunteering work that I was doing. I was taking paying jobs away from locals where I was volunteering. I didn't know enough about the context, about where I was to ethically do that work, to do that work well. And so I had to be really critical about myself. I had to ask myself really hard questions. But in asking myself really hard questions, why do you think that work is so much cooler than the work you could be doing at home? Why do you feel you need to be going into all of these different cultural spaces when you don't have a full understanding of your own? Though asking those questions was when I started finding a purpose in my activism that was directly tied to values and experiences that were my own. When I sat down and thought, well, what has been important to me my entire life? For me, it was being outside and the land on which I live. I grew up having to separate my identity my Indigenous identity. No one at school knew I was Indigenous because they said such racist, horrible things about Indigenous people. So I never told anyone I was Indigenous at school. So the time we spent on reserve with our family or with our friends and kin, when we would have weekends and holidays, we would always be on the land. And this became a space where I could acknowledge and be my full self and be proud of who and where I come from. And so that had been a consistent value and experience in my life. So when I started thinking, okay, what's important to me? Who am I? Where do I come from? And I recognized this is really important to me. Is there an opportunity to make this a part of my work and education, in my activism? And the answer was yes. And so I was able to start finding a direction when I asked, what's important to me and what are my experiences and where do I come from? And who do I belong to? I belong to my family. I belong to a community of people who look like me, who have similar experiences as me. I belong to a wider community of very different people who share in our basic needs and connection to Earth. And so thinking through this and really taking the time to reflect on not what's going to get you grants and money, not what's going to make your CV or your resume better, not what's going to get you into university, but what are you really passionate about? And sometimes that looks like taking a little bit of everything, going to a cool student club and exploring an interest that maybe you're not familiar with. Going to different online panels and presentations. Doing this and exposing yourself to as many things as possible is going to help you not only explore what you are most passionate about, but it's going to help you identify the people who could support you when you do find that pathway. It's where doing this is where I found all of my mentors, some of my closest friends, and the people who opened the doors to make my activism possible in my education and in my work, where now I can make a living on the activism I pursue. So I hope that you may take away something from this profile video and the written profile. I'm always in love with talking to students and educators, so please connect with me if you're able to. And again, I want to leave you with the acknowledgement that we cannot be everything to everyone. We cannot be everything to everyone. I do go to protests. I do engage in community services, and I do volunteer here and now. But I'm very careful about how far I stretch myself. And I really focus on being really good and really aware of how I do activism through education and through policy work. And I know that I am doing everything I can to be as effective as possible in this pathway. And that I can acknowledge that I don't need to be the one organizing the protest. I don't need to be the one organizing the resource distribution. I can still be contributing to that. But I also recognize the value I hold for myself in my health and my ability to do this for a long time. So you may be able to do all the different things I definitely did when I was younger, but also know and don't carry guilt if you aren't doing every single channel of activism. You don't need to do that. Find out what's appropriate for you to do and honor the passion that you have and what you care about. And invest in understanding that. Invest on what's happened before. Invest on understanding, how did we get here today? And that, compounded with, again, that critical self-reflection, can help you identify the ways that you can contribute to activism in ways that are appropriate and effective for you. So thank you so much. And I hope, again, that I've brought some value to your life and your work.